This is week 192 of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I'm Belokur, reporting to you from Kyiv, and I'll be taking you through the top stories from Ukraine this week. There are multiple updates to cover from the front lines, and none of them bode especially well for Ukraine. We're going to start in the north and work south from there. Russia is attempting to overrun the city of Kupiansk on the eastern border of Kharkiv Oblast, and if they succeed, it'll be the largest city since the start of the full-scale invasion to be occupied by Russian forces, liberated by Ukraine, and then retaken by Russia. From their stronghold north of the city, Russia is expending large amounts of troops to approach the city by boat from the Oskil River, to crawl under the river through pipes, and to camouflage themselves as civilians to infiltrate the city limits. In tandem with the network of drones that dominate the front lines, it's becoming increasingly hard for Ukraine to identify and fend off Russian attacks as they're happening. Kupiansk is a railway and logistical hub that lies southeast of the regional capital of Kharkiv. After the city's liberation in autumn of 2022, Russian forces were driven back to the east side of the Oskil River, but recent months have seen them creeping back to the West Bank, targeting weak spots to gain territory to the north and west of the city. In short, setting the stage for encirclement. As a strategic target for Russia, the reoccupation of Kupiansk would greatly shift the dynamic of defense for the entirety of Kharkiv Oblast to the north and west, and of Donbass to the south. Around 560 residents are still in Kupiansk, with no way to be evacuated as Ukrainian forces are pushed further and further back. The situation is also deteriorating for Ukraine in Pokrovsk, another long-embattled city like Kupiansk, where Russian troops are amassing in greater and greater numbers. Pokrovsk, located in Donetsk Oblast, emerged in the last year as a primary target in Russia's campaign to destabilize and capture the remainder of the Donbass region. But things have taken a sharp turn for the worse since this summer. As of this week, Ukraine reported that hundreds of Russian troops have snuck into Pokrovsk and spread out across different neighborhoods, and they're said to outnumber Ukrainian troops at a ratio of about 8-1. Although total Russian control has not yet been confirmed and street combat is ongoing, it would take a miracle to reverse the current imbalance. The number of troops, the rampant use of FPV drones, and the growing blanket of Russians across the city depict a strategy of infiltrating and overwhelming, not direct frontal assault. Rather than storming the city, Russia is steadily choking it until it collapses. I talked about Pokrovsk last week in terms of the war crimes committed there recently, the shooting of unarmed civilians by Russian forces, allegedly at their commander's orders. As much as the loss of Pokrovsk spells doom from a military strategic point of view, it's also a human tragedy for the remaining residents and all those living in the cities that lie to the west, which will now find themselves the new targets of Russia's advance. But as I said last week, it's important that these cities not become endless blurs of names and map points that a foreign audience can't really differentiate in a never-ending stream of Russian crimes over the years. My colleague, Elena Zashko, wrote an op-ed 2 months ago about her memories of Pokrovsk before the war, and that's going to be linked in the description below. For Ukrainians, these cities aren't just the sites of battles, but the places where they bought school supplies and prom dresses as kids, where they visited friends at college, and where they saw hope fade as Russia's black cloud moves further and further west. So I encourage you to read Elena's piece and get a true sense of this loss. Just this week, U.S. intelligence agencies delivered the assessment that Russian President Vladimir Putin shows no indication of being willing to negotiate a ceasefire or settlement with Ukraine, and is in fact more committed than ever to achieving military victory, despite the astronomical casualties and the risk of growing unpopularity at home. While they may make platitudes to powerful allies that they want the war to end as much as anyone, Russia's actual plan is to continue its advance, to exhaust Western support for Ukraine, to force capitulation, and to send the message that the Russian army can't be stopped. The next phases of this war hinge on Ukraine's ability to hold on and the West's ability to provide support that enables not just survival, but actual defense. As Russia is gearing up for the long term, so are we. We'll continue our reporting no matter what. And your support counts now more than ever. If you'd like to join the tens of thousands who support us each month for as little as $5, there will be a link to our membership page in the description below. Thanks also to everyone who donates directly via YouTube. We see you and we appreciate you. Speaking of Russia's refusal to tone down its maximalist goals, they're at it again with the incursions into NATO territory and airspace. First, 2 Russian fighter jets from the Kaliningrad enclave violated Lithuanian airspace on October 23rd. A Lithuanian national security advisor said that there was no way to know if the violation was a test or accidental. Then, on Thursday, Poland intercepted a Russian reconnaissance jet over the Baltic Sea. And while this jet wasn't technically violating Poland's airspace, it didn't have a flight plan and its transponder was off, which meant it wasn't on anyone's radar and was presumably avoiding detection. And after so-called smuggling balloons flew into Lithuania from Belarus for 3 nights in a row this week, prompting Vilnius airport to temporarily shut down several times within a short period, the National Crisis Management Center announced that it would be closing the last 2 open land borders between Lithuania and Belarus for an indefinite period. The balloons in question were reportedly carrying contraband cigarettes, so they were more of an issue for the border guard than the military. But you can understand how unidentified flying objects along NATO's eastern flank are raising particular alarm in the current climate. These events were coupled with the announcement on Wednesday that the US is planning to reduce the number of its troops deployed to Eastern Europe. Romania's defense ministry said that, although not unexpected, the move to halt the rotation of an American brigade stationed at a Romanian Black Sea airbase will reduce the presence of American troops in the region amid rising tensions. 20,000 U.S. troops were deployed to NATO's eastern flank in 2022, spread across Romania, Poland, and the Baltic states. And officials reported earlier this year that up to 10,000 of them may be withdrawn. While Romania states that the decision is in line with current plans for bolstering support in the region and doesn't signal a significant deterioration of allied NATO defense, it's still alarming for those concerned that Russia may attack Europe in the foreseeable future. The Trump administration has indicated that in scaling down its military presence in Europe, it will be able to build up its presence in the Pacific in anticipation of a future conflict with China. I've talked before about the relationship between a potential war in Asia and all-out war in Europe. If Russia sees that China is invading Taiwan, it may take the opportunity to launch an attack on the Baltic states or Poland, and vice versa. It benefits both superpowers to have NATO resources stretched thin across the globe. The withdrawal of American troops from Europe makes it all the more urgent that the continent rearm and take the threat from Russia seriously. And that starts with making sure that Ukraine stays standing. We are excited to announce the Kyiv Independent's first ever live event in New York City, where members of our team will share stories from the life of a newsroom in times of war. The program will include personal accounts by our staff, visual storytelling, and a silent auction whose proceeds will go towards supporting the work of our War Crimes Investigations Unit. You can learn more and reserve a spot at the link in the description below. The month of October began with the shocking news that a French journalist was killed by a Russian drone in Donetsk Oblast. Unfortunately, this would begin a tragic trend throughout the month, as Russia's network of FPV drones pushes the danger zone further and further back from the actual front line and makes life across eastern and southern Ukraine increasingly dangerous for civilians, journalists, and humanitarians. Antony Lalikan, a 37-year-old seasoned combat photographer, was killed on October 3rd in a direct hit by an FPV drone. Also injured in the attack was Georgy Ivanchenko, a Ukrainian photographer who has worked as a freelancer for the Kyiv Independent on many occasions. Lalikan was killed almost instantly, while Ivanchenko lost a leg and is still recovering. This incident took place about 15 miles west from the front line, just south of Kramatorsk, which is the Ukrainian military stronghold of Donetsk Oblast that many people transit through to get to the front lines. Both men were clearly wearing vests indicating that they were members of the press, and they were targeted anyway, which is, needless to say, a war crime. On Sunday, 2 Ukrainian journalists, Elena Hramova and Yevgen Karmazin, were also killed while on assignment in Kramatorsk. A Russian Lancet drone struck their car in a targeted attack. On Tuesday, 3 journalists, 2 Ukrainians and a German, were injured on assignment while accompanying a Ukrainian air defense team. The group was over 25 kilometers behind the front line when another Lancet struck a nearby military vehicle, killing 1 soldier and injuring others, including the journalists. We actually spoke briefly with a press officer from the 24th Separate Mechanized Brigade, who recently saved a foreign journalist in Kostiantynivka by shooting down an FPV drone in a dramatic moment that was captured on film.
From the beginning, I want to say that it is not a very unusual situation, because on the front line, a lot of our servicemen face this situation, and they shot down Russian drones regularly, so for me as a serviceman it is not something unusual. But for the press officer who is sometimes escorting journalists to places which are closer to the front line, it happens not every day, of course. So what happened that day, I was escorting Dutch journalist Daphne to Konstantinivka city, which is very close to the front line and constantly is under shelling and under drone attack. It is not a very easy place to work, not only for servicemen, but also for the journalist, and you need to be very careful being there. When we were near the church, which was damaged heavily by Russian airstrike, we brought the journalist to film this, and the reality is looks like dangerous zone becomes more wider. The Russian army targets not only journalists or military, they also target civilian with, for example, landmines. War became more cruel and more dangerous, and it's fact.
As I said before, it's a war crime to attack members of the press who are classified as non-combatants. During the full-scale invasion, Russia has killed over 20 journalists working on assignment and committed over 800 crimes against journalists and media outlets, according to the Institute of Mass Information. So why the uptick in these tragedies this month? It speaks to 2 things. First, Russia's indiscriminate targeting of everyone in Ukraine, regardless of whether they're combatants or not. A press helmet isn't enough to stop Russian troops from striking. But on an even bigger scale, it's the fact that Russia's drones are reaching greater distances behind the front lines than ever, creating a danger zone that's expanding more rapidly than Ukraine can defend against. So I know it can be a bit abstract when I say that a city like Kramatorsk, 15 miles from the front line, is considered to be something of a safe zone, even when it's frequently targeted by airstrikes, but it's all about calculated risk. Essentially, all people who work near the front lines have mental gradations of distance that inform how likely it is to encounter sudden threats like FPV drones. And those distinctions are getting less and less clear as Russia's drone web moves further over Ukrainian territory. If before a deadly small drone strike in Kramatorsk was considered an anomaly, now it's more indicative of a moving cloud. And this means that for every civilian living and working along every part of the front line, the sense of what's normal and safe is taking a turn for the worse. As a media outlet that reports from the front line, your support in this time goes directly towards keeping our staff safe. Our community recently raised funds to buy a car for our field reporters to use on assignment, something that makes a huge difference as the situation changes rapidly. If you'd like to join our community and help fund our work, please see the description below for more information.
One of our members this week asked if there are more scams in general. How do Ukrainians choose who or what to support? And specifically, if we find a request online and it's not from someone we know and trust, how would we check? So, to answer your question, dear member, scams have unfortunately existed since the start of Russia's war against Ukraine. And I wouldn't say that there's more, it's just that you constantly have to be vigilant. Every volunteer that I see collecting money who is trustworthy is constantly posting receipts after their purchases to confirm with the people who donated that they did in fact purchase these things. Or they have photos of them with this, whether it's, medical supplies, a car, any of these things. So any real, truly serious volunteer is going to give you updates about your work. It's as simple as that.
That's all for this week. We'll be back next Sunday with more news from Ukraine. If you appreciated this video, please consider becoming a member of the Kyiv Independent community. It's truly thanks to viewers like you that we can do this work, and we're so grateful for your support. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.